good turnout. Well, are you all seated and ready for action? There, I see empty seats. I think that's awful. Oh. All right. We'll have a few ghosts there. I have something I want to say to the CL 112 class, and today we have visiting the FMM. What is your class? FM 122 is Intro to Buying Merchandise. Yes, and we have a wonderful group of 27 or so students from that class. So we're one big family here because we know the importance of coming here to hear someone from the fashion industry like Andrew Rosen. It's a privilege. It's a privilege, 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 and I know what I'm saying. That's that. But I wanted to bring to your attention one thing that horrified me. We had a call from a student who wanted to know who Katie Murphy is. How many of you know who Katie Murphy is? Raise your hand. Not one. Well, you should know. That's really, and this amphitheater, they wanted to know why the Katie Murphy Amphitheater was named Katie Murphy. Who was she? And I'm going to tell you very briefly. Katie Murphy, who died in 1975, and that was a great loss. It was Katie Murphy who made Bloomingdale's under the leadership of Marvin Traub. How many of you know the name Marvin Traub, especially merchandising, marketing, FMM? Well, I'm going to make a proposal to make a booklet with the history of the most important people, and I don't mean ancient history. Those are things you should have at your fingertips and know what happened in the past that built the fashion industry so that you are here in FIT. People like Marvin Traub and the grandfather of Andrew Rosen, who was Arthur Rosen, started Puritan Fashion. This is a family who made fashion, made FIT an important school. It just frustrates me because if you should all get the book by Ira Niemark. It's in the school library, at the school bookstore, and you'll have the whole history of all the important people that you are benefiting from and learning from for your future. Marvin Traub was a fashion director, and was Catherine Murphy, and they put together the important fashion names: Yves Saint Laurent, Valentino, Issey Miyake, Missoni, and hundreds of others. She gathered the young customers and brought contemporary lines. If she was there today, there would be Theory, too. Calvin Klein, fashion-conscious people, and so on and so forth. I don't want to spend time doing this. You should be reading it. Ralph Lauren, exclusive with Bloomies. Bloomies became a fashion store where in the past it was just a very dull, boring department store, not even. So you can thank Katie Murphy, and you're sitting in the amphitheater. And how did it get named after her? When she died, Marvin Traub was on the board here at FIT, and he proposed that we name, when it was just finished that year too, the amphitheater, and that's how this place was named in her honor for her great contribution to fashion. That's the end of that story. And now I'm going to tell you a little bit about Andrew. Andrew Rosen was born in Boston. The third generation, his family, to be a member of the third generation of his family. He's a fashion leader. His grandfather in 1910, how many of you know Puritan fashion? Well, you better look it up. Puritan. I know. It's sad because Puritan fashion were, I get frustrated. Arthur's grandfather was a visionary. We need more men like that, but we have his son here today who follows in their footsteps and is a visionary of today's world, which he's moved on. And how many of you know Theory? Raise your... thank God. Oh, wonderful. That's all we need. So, yes. And his father, Carl, was also another visionary, knew what the human being was all about and how to appeal to them, how to tumult in the industry. It's what we need today, and it is. We have, thank God. That's why I'm so proud and happy to have Andrew here. And I'm going to get off the stage real fast because Andrew began his career in his grandpa's company, Puritan, third generation, and he was president, CEO. And then they acquired Calvin Klein and Barry Schwartz, and Andrew moved to the helm of Anne Klein as president CEO. And in '97, Andrew founded Theory, redefining contemporary fashion. Redefining contemporary fashion. Theory's strategy emphasized fit and quality. Theory today is a phenomenon, leading the explosion of his today fashion into stores like Barney's, Bloomie's, Neiman Marcus, Saks, Bergdorf's. Theory is already globally flourishing. Andrew Rosen, in his commitment to developing young talent, has endowed scholarships at our FIT and is a sponsor of the CFDA Vogue Fashion Fund. So he's continuing his family's commitment to innovation and vision. The Rosen family is a great gift to all of us, keeping rooted family values and ideals in today's troubled world. Please take me away. I love you. Thank God for you.
All right, well, we're lucky that Professor Pervasian has got so much history and so much experience in our industry, and I thank you for your kind words. I hope I live up to some of them. So anyway, I don't do a lot of these kind of things anyway, but Professor Pervasian always inspires me to come and speak to you guys, and I try to do that. Well, I did that a few months ago, and maybe I'll do that a few months from now. But, I maybe have a different experience in the industry than most people. It's true, my grandfather started Puritan Fashions in the early 1900s, somewhere around 1910. I like to say 1910 because in a few years I can celebrate 100 years of fashion in the family and so on. My grandfather started, my dad followed after him, and I still remember, it wasn't so long ago, it was actually a long time ago, but I still remember I was like a kid like you guys, right? And a kid like you guys, thinking about what I was going to do, and the times back then were uncertain, sort of like the times are now, the mid-1970s. And I was actually a golfer, and I was thinking I was going to be a professional golfer. And my uncle got a hold of me one day, and he said to me, "What the hell are you doing? Why are you wasting your time? You should go work for your father." And so I was 19 years old, and instead of going to school, went to work for my dad. And as I said, it was not too different than you guys, because I was about the age of a lot of you guys are here, and wanting to make a future for myself, wanting to, at that time really didn't have the desire that I wanted to do anything important, or I just wanted to have a career doing something. And I was lucky enough, as I say, I found, I was able to get involved in an industry that I was really passionate about, and 35 years later, 33 years later, I still love coming to work every day. But I started with my dad, and my dad put me to work in the factories and the warehouses. Worked in a knitting mill in Long Island. I worked in a factory in New Bedford, Massachusetts. Spent about 2 years just sort of getting my introduction to the business. So for me, for you guys, you go to class every day. I had schooling in a different way. I went to school in warehouses and factories and so on. And learned pretty much, I thought at the time, all there was to know about what happened in a warehouse, what happened in a factory, and probably not too dissimilar to you guys. I thought I knew pretty much everything once I heard it once or saw it once, and came to realize later that maybe I wasn't quite as smart then that I thought I was, but the experience was really, really good, and the experience was really, really invaluable, and even today, because I had that experience, I know pretty much everything that goes on in the back end of the house there, in the warehouses and the factories. So from there, my dad had the license for Calvin Klein jeans, and went to work for my dad in New York in the showroom, and was really in those days. Calvin Klein jeans was a phenomenon. It was mid 1970s. Brooke Shields. Everyone heard of Brooke Shields and Calvin Klein jeans and so on, and it was just amazing experience, amazing opportunity, and started in the showroom, worked my way up, and again, one thing that I want to impress to all of you guys, there are no rules in the fashion industry, and it gives you the freedom to be innovative. It gives you the freedom to think outside the box. It gives you the freedom to be able to be yourself. And there is not one way to do things. There are many, many ways to be successful in the fashion industry, and there isn't sort of, I couldn't give you a formula, here's a book, here's how to do it. It really, a lot of it depends on individual visions and individual passion and so on, and Professor Pafazian talked about sort of Katie Murphy, who was a real inspiration, and Katie Murphy's boss, Marvin Traub, who was just an amazing, and still is today at 80 years old, an amazing visionary. But these are people that carve their own path, their own way. It isn't like, I don't believe that you have to do things the way everyone else does them. I believe you can always be a little bit innovative and creative. So anyway, worked in the showroom and worked my way up, because I was somewhat innovative. I was willing to take some risk. I was willing to experiment. I was willing to try things. I wasn't just willing to accept the way everyone told me it had to be. I certainly wanted to listen to the way everyone told me it had to be, but then I wanted to be able to add something to that. And about 3 or 4 years into my work experience, my dad got sick. And my dad got sick, he had cancer, and he passed away in 1983. And in 1983, at 25 years old, I became the CEO of a New York Stock Exchange company. And, again, like I said to you earlier, I thought I knew everything. And I thought that I was young, I was passionate, I was innovative, but I didn't really have so much experience. I sort of got away with it because I was so passionate, and I wasn't really afraid because I didn't know what being afraid was. And so 25 years old, CEO of a New York Stock Exchange company, and the company was predominantly, not predominantly, was 100% Calvin Klein. We were the licensee for Calvin Klein jeans, and about a year later, Calvin Klein and his partner said, no 26-year-old kid is going to determine the fate of our company, and in a very sort of public, hostile way, bought the company. My family at that time only owned about 15% of the stock, bought the company, and I had sort of a very difficult time because it was a very public kind of situation, and every day I read the newspapers and look at the newspaper. There was something about me, the Women's Wear Daily, the New York Times, so on and so forth. And I, again, partly because I think that I was young and I just didn't really know any better. I was going to just sort of make this thing work out. And at that time, they had bought the company, and they had hired a fellow that used to be the CEO of Saks Fifth Avenue to come in and run the company. And when they did that, I had decided that maybe I was best off going to find another job, and I had gotten an opportunity to go work at Ralph Lauren, running a few of their businesses. And sort of this is the first big thing that I want to tell you is, rather than me go and accept this job with Ralph Lauren, it was a nice job, making, you know, $300,000 or $400,000 a year, big title, so on and so forth, sort of fancy. And before I went and accepted that job, I went to the boss, my boss at that time that they had hired, and I had a discussion with him. And I asked him for his opinion as to what he thought I should do. And it was a good thing I did that, because the first thing he said to me is, you're not going anywhere, you're going to stay here with me, you're going to help me run the company. One day, you're going to be the head of this company again. And I looked at him, I said, yeah, that's good. You obviously haven't been reading the papers, because the papers were pretty publicly damaging about some young 26-year-old kid and running the Calvin Klein business. But he said, no, you're going to stay here with me. And sort of rather than get all, you know, sort of brash and emotional and say, screw you, I'm going to leave, I decided to take a step back, and he wanted me to run one of the businesses, not the whole business, and decided to take a step back, and I did that, and I worked under him for a couple of years. And the second piece of that is, I rather than acted emotionally and got pissed off and left, I ended up staying, which was a good thing. The second thing is, I, at 26 years old, as I said to you, didn't have too much experience, had a lot of other things, and was able to learn from a guy that had tremendous integrity, tremendous passion, and tremendous experience in our industry, and was a great mentor to me, and was a great, was actually a fantastic thing, because I had learned from my father. I had had that experience, and now I had an opportunity to learn from someone else who was very smart and very successful in the industry and had a little different perspective on things. And throughout my career, as I went on, there was a number of people that were very influential, sort of, in my in my learning and in my understanding of the industry. And when I look back today and I say, what is some of the reason? What's the real reason that I was successful? The real reason that I was successful is I had incredible people that I was able to work with, learn from, understand their philosophy, understand their point of view on things, and then be able to make the determination for myself what was going to work for me. I never really would say to you that I do things the way my father did them. I did them the way this gentleman that I'm talking about, Bob Suslow, or even Calvin Klein and Barry Schwartz, or any of the people I worked with. I always had the opportunity to understand their point of view and develop my own. And I think that's something that is very important in our industry, is to have a point of view, is not just to not just to go along, but to really be able to make the determination as to what you believe. So I stay at Calvin Klein, I work with this guy, I get a lot of experience and so on and so forth, and one day he and Calvin Klein and Barry Schwartz have a disagreement. And they, of course, owned the company and threw him out of the company. And they bring somebody in. The guy is there for a few months. He doesn't really fit into the company culture very well, doesn't fit into the company very well. And 29 years old, I become the head of the Calvin Klein company. And it was something that, in a way, I had wanted to stay there for one reason, which was to validate my father's decision that I was qualified to be head of the company, and that ended up. I never thought that would happen again, but it did, and I stayed only for about 6 months after that. And I stayed only 6 months after that because there was nothing left there for me. And from the time I was 19 years old till the time I was 29 years old, it was the only company I ever knew. It was the only place I had worked, and it was connected to, my grandfather started the company in 1910. It was 1989, and I just felt that there was nothing there for me anymore. And the first job opportunity I got, I left. I didn't even know whether I'd like it, not like it, whatever. I just wanted to do something different. I didn't want to do something connected to my family anymore. I wanted to do something that sort of was starting out on my own. And I accepted the job as the CEO of Anne Klein. Anne Klein at that time was a very prominent apparel company. Anne Klein was a great designer in her own right, died in the mid-70s, and Donna Karen was Anne Klein's assistant, and she became the chief designer after after Anne Klein passed away, and built the company really into one of the foremost American sportswear companies. And Donna Karen in 1988 left Anne Klein, and started her own company, but she left Anne Klein. The owners of Anne Klein at that time gave Donna Karen an option. They told her they had good news and bad news. The bad news was she was going to get fired from Anne Klein. The good news was that they were going to put her into her own business and fund her own business. And obviously Donna Karen has been one of was at Anne Klein and has been for herself one of the most visionary American designers, and someone who one can have a lot of respect for. So I go to Anne Klein and become the CEO of Anne Klein. And when I got there, I didn't know what I got to. I only had been used to Calvin Klein. I'd been used to Calvin Klein aesthetic. I'd been used to Calvin Klein way of doing business. And Anne Klein was completely different. And I, over the next 4 or 5 years, worked very hard to evolve the culture of Anne Klein. And I evolved the culture of Anne Klein so much that the owners of Anne Klein decided to fire me. They decided to fire me because I had the vision that Anne Klein needed to be more modern and more appealing to a new modern customer, and they wanted to appeal to what they had appealed to for the last 20 years. And anyway, it was a fairly traumatic moment for me. I was now 37 or 8 years old and out of work, and sort of not so hireable. But anyway, like, I can tell that story now because everything has worked out really well since then. But I don't know whether I could have told that same story. But here's the other thing too, in life, there's so many different peaks and valleys. It isn't just that things work out great and that there's always sitting on the sunny side of the street. Sometimes the street is really sunny, and sometimes the street is not so sunny, and sometimes it's even raining and cold and miserable and so on. But the one thing is that I had a lot of faith and confidence in myself and what I learned and what I knew and what I believed in, and wasn't really was concerned, but had never lost my faith in my understanding of the industry. And one of the reasons for that is because I really did all the way through did my homework, so to speak, you know. I was always interested in having my mind open and learning and getting exposed to so many things, and a student of the industry. And you know, one of the things I was thinking here is that you guys want a career in the industry and so on. One of the things you got to look at is the history of our industry. And one of the things that you guys got to spend some time doing, it's so much easier today than it was in 1970s or 1980s, even the 1990s, is understand where our industry has come from and who the great visionaries of our industry are and have been, and not so you can duplicate what they do, but so you can understand the roots of what makes a company successful. And you know, in our industry, it's not about a whole group of people. It ultimately is about a whole group of people, but it starts with one person's vision. And you know, having to understand how some of these great minds have done what they've done, and you know, I guess in some ways in contemporary fashion, I am considered, because, and when I go on with the story a little bit, I can tell you how everything evolved. But you know, I'm sort of, I guess people have some respect for what I have done or what I do. And you know, as I've told you before, that was the process of evolution, because there was a lot of years that people didn't have any sort of regard or respect for what I was doing, or they maybe didn't understand what I was doing or why I was doing it. But you know, it was because I had the opportunity to have some great experience and to learn from some really great people, that one day I was also allowed to be able to do something really special in the industry. You know, and it wasn't, as I say, it wasn't like I had all these successes. There's a lot of people in our industry that, you know, it's not been a straight line up. You look at a guy like Marc Jacobs, and you guys study sort of the career of Marc Jacobs. You look at the career of Tom Ford. There's a whole host of the leaders of our industry that have really become who they've become because they failed. And in a way, you learn more from failing than you do from succeeding. So now I get fired from Anne Klein. I don't have this job. I'm really not so employable. I went on one interview. I went on an interview. There's a woman by the name of Linda Wachner. Linda Wachner was a very famous woman in our industry back in the late 1980s, early 90s, one of the giants of our industry. I mean, really a giant. I saw her about 2 weeks ago in a restaurant. She's actually a nice woman now. She was a killer back then. But anyway, so I went on this interview. She was the CEO of Warnaco. Warnaco was a big, so some of you guys know her. So Warnaco was this big conglomerate, had all these different divisions, and she actually, she had me come in, and I didn't have a resume or anything. So she had me come in, and she talked to me for about 15 minutes. She says, well, I have this company in California. If you want to go run it, you want to move to California and go run it, you know, call me back. And it was that company, Athletic Fitness, yeah, Speedo Athletic Fitness, one of those things. But I had no interest in that. That was not what I was going to do. And so anyway, I wanted to start my own business. I wanted, after all these years working for my dad, working for Calvin Klein and his partner, working for Anne Klein, sort of wanted to do something out on my own. Didn't really know what that meant, you know. I mean, when I say didn't really know what that meant, I knew what that meant, but I didn't really know what it meant. Because it's not so easy to start a business. And, you know, I had met this guy, Elie Tahari. And Elie was an interesting guy. Elie was a guy that never went to school, grew up in another country, came here with no money, no nothing, and was very successful building his business. And he wanted me to come and run his business. And he wanted me to help him run his business. And I said to him, I don't have any interest in running a business. I want to start a business. And at that time, I had sort of had these ideas of what I wanted to start. Is I wanted to start a business that, I could come to work every day and not really worry about the size of the business, but really be worried about the quality of the experience, the quality of the work, just enjoy coming to work every day and really being proud of the kind of clothing and the kind of clothing and the kind of experience that I created in the company. And I also felt at that time that there were all these companies that were making clothes that this shirt had to go with this pair of pants, had to go with this jacket, all trying to sell coordinated outfits. And this is now 1996. And I felt at that time that with the oncoming of cellular phones, the internet and everything, that it was going to change dramatically the way people worked, the way people lived, and that they wanted clothes that were much more versatile than the clothes that were out there. They wanted clothes that were individual pieces. They wanted clothes that could be mixed and matched throughout their wardrobe and for their lifestyle. And I wanted to take the idea of the jean business, which was individual items, and mix them together with the luxury sportswear business, which I had learned at Anne Klein, and make sort of this luxury item business. Great pants and shirts and jackets, but all individual pieces that could be, as I say, worn with things you had in your closet or worn with each other. And the beauty of what I was going to do was that I was going to make everything with fabrics with lycra. And the reason I was going to make everything with fabrics with lycra is that the shape and proportion of clothing made of fabrics with lycra could be totally different than without lycra, because the fabric had tremendous elasticity and recovery. So shirts could be ultra slim and sexy, and the proportions on pants could be totally changed, so that a very classic shirt, a very classic pair of pants wasn't going to look classic anymore, because it was going to fit and feel totally differently. And people had been messing around with clothing with lycra, but they hadn't done an exclusive line of clothing with lycra. And the reason I wanted to do exclusively clothing with lycra, because the manufacturing and the fitting of clothing where the specs of before you totally threw out, because whatever the measurements were for a standard shirt or a standard jacket or a standard pair of pants no longer existed because of the elasticity of the fabric, that there could be, you had to look at this with a whole different eye. You couldn't look at it with the same specifications. You couldn't fit it the same way as you did before. You had to fit it differently. And you couldn't even sew it the same way, because with the elasticity, you had to sew it a little differently. So I really, with a very simple idea, was going to have clothing that was totally different than anything else that was out there. I never thought I was crazy. How can you go from running big companies to starting a little company making clothing with only lycra? And Elie and I got together, and Elie and I were partners on this, and we started from nothing. And I still remember, as I say, I didn't really, I just fell in love with the idea and was passionate about, hey, I had to be in my own business, I had to do something. But this was the other thing that was really interesting, is most people, when they're passionate about wanting to start their own business and do this, are usually 20, 22, 23, 25, 26 years old, whatever, and they don't really have too much experience. But here I was starting this business. I was 37 years old, 38 years old, had all this experience, and it was a big thing, because I think if I had started my business when I was 25 or 6 years old, it never would have come out the way it came out. And this is the other thing I say to you guys. I say to you guys, you got to do research. I say to you guys, you got to be passionate and open-minded. You got to you got to have a good mentor, and you got to have experience. Without experience, you have nothing. And so I think another big thing is that I was able to practice on someone else's money. And I was able to sort of, once I had enough experience and so on, I was able to start with my money. And I'll give you another company that started, another guys that were really successful doing that was Liz Claiborne. Liz Claiborne, Art Ortenberg and Liz Claiborne, and their companies, they started when they were, 40 years old or so. And I think that was a very important thing. So it's not always, all you guys go to school, and the thing is, it's very easy in the fashion industry to think, oh, well, I can start making this or that or the other thing. And I see so many people today, because always young people come and see me, and the first thing I tell them is, they have this little business or so, and the first thing I tell them is, forget the idea of having a business yourself, go get some experience first. So I think that's an important thing. So anyway, I started this thing, and clothing with lycra, all item-oriented, and took off like crazy. 6 million the first year, 20 million the second year, 40 million the third year. All really amazing and good. And it was never, as I said to you, my thing was never about how much volume I could do. It was about making clothes that were relevant for the modern, contemporary consumer, making clothes that were about working for a woman's lifestyle, not about clothing that had to be in the pages of a fashion magazine. I never even had a PR person. I never had I never really worried about any of that kind of stuff. The only thing I worried about was making clothes that, yes, were fashionable, making clothes that were sexy, making clothes that were cool, but making clothes that were relevant for the consumer group that I was wanting to appeal to. I never thought about Clothing America. I never thought about trying to make something for everyone. I thought about a specific customer with a specific aesthetic and with a specific price range, and that's what I did, and I did it really well. And it was very narrow. It was not a whole collection of clothes. It was a few pair of pants, a few shirts, and then ultimately evolved into some jackets and some sweaters and some T-shirts and so on. But that happened down the road. And one of my big things. And I get involved in starting lots of companies and all, and have some other companies besides Theory, which I'll talk to you about in a minute. And all of the companies I started with the same concept is that it was very narrowly focused. And it was very narrowly focused so that what we did, we could do very well, and we could do better than anyone else. Alice and Olivia was a company I started with a young woman, and it was all on the idea of making pants with home furnishing fabrics, tapestry fabrics. Company today grew from 0 to $45 million. There's another company called Griffin, is a concept that started with just making trench coats and making very cool modern trench coats. A company called Rag & Bone, which really started off making jeans and shirts and so on. And there's another company called Kiki de Montparnasse, which was all about intimacy and lingerie and sex and all that kind of thing. So I always like to start businesses that are very narrowly focused on a singular idea. And I think that's very important. I also like to do things, like I was saying with Theory, is one of the reasons why I started it. It was about clothing with lycra. There was a void in the marketplace. Nobody was doing that. Nobody was making individual pieces in a luxury way, making a luxury item business. So I think it's good that always you find some voids in the marketplace. I think today even, if you look at some of the companies that have been successful recently. One comes to mind, I'm sure you guys know it, is this company, Kern Elliott. Kern Elliott makes jeans. They were the guys that started with this whole boyfriend concept, making sort of big, oversized jeans for girls. Really cool. But anyway, so the other thing is that with theory, as I said to you guys, I didn't want, it wasn't really about making clothes that made the pages of Vogue magazine. It wasn't really about getting all this press, which everyone talks about today. Like everyone talks about, oh, you got to have press, you got to have this. My view is that if you do something really well and it really cuts through and stands for something, all of that stuff happens naturally. All of that stuff, all of the press, all of the celebrity, all of that kind of stuff, you don't have to force it to happen. And so the other thing that I think is really important is I like to keep things really simple. So to me, that the whole styling idea of theory, and I think we've gotten a little bit off of that right now, and that's something that I've been working a lot with the group. The whole styling idea of theory was about the shape and proportion of things. It wasn't about all of the details that were put on the clothes. It wasn't about seams, pockets, and buttons and everything else. It was about shape and proportion and the mix of clothes. How, you know, the different lengths or different proportions, the length of the rise, the shape of the leg, the cuts of the shirts or the jackets. It's really, really important. And I think that the other thing, you guys are not studying design. I'm talking to you a little bit about design, but you know, you look at, again, all these designers, right? All these designers today that are, or all these designers over the years. And all of the designers have been successful because they had great design, but they had somebody from a merchandising perspective working with them to take those great ideas and designs and making them into a business. And you know, you look at, I mentioned Tom Ford earlier, Tom Ford and Domenico De Sole at Gucci, or both of those guys had been around for a long time before they got together. And when they got together, there was something really amazing that they created. And I think you look at Marc Jacobs and his partner, which I know everyone talks about all the time, is that Robert Duffy. And I think that you look at Miuccia Prada and her husband. You know, there's so many of these things, Pierre Berger and Yves Saint Laurent. So, which was just, we saw Yves Saint Laurent sold all his furniture recently. 480 million, I think he got for his furniture. It was pretty crazy at an auction. There was one chair Yves Saint Laurent sold. I found this mind-boggling. This was about 10 days ago. $28 million for a chair. It's pretty crazy. But anyway, so that was sort of the principle that I started theory on. I also felt like, you know, my philosophy was that as I say, you had to keep things simple. It had to be very focused. You have to have a point of view. I'm not really a designer by trade, right? So here I am. I'm not necessarily a designer, but I had, I mean, the whole concept of theory, the concept of theory today, the concept of what we do and how we do it is based on the vision and aesthetic that I have created and maintain. And you know, you guys are studying merchandising. I basically was a merchandising student. I wasn't a design student. And I think that there has got to be, you know, it's very important, the merchandising element of design. One has to have, again, I think it's very important to have a strong aesthetic, a strong point of view, but I think that there has to be a combination of design and merchandising. I think that's one of the reasons our company has been so successful over the years, is because it isn't purely just about design. It is about a combination of design and merchandising. And the other thing is that our company over the years has continued to evolve. And so many things, so many times I see companies that start up and they're really hot for a short period of time, and because they stay doing what they're doing and don't continue to evolve their business and their philosophy as the world evolves and fashion evolves and people's taste evolves, that they tend to, the world tends to, and fashion tends to evolve past them. I mean, DKNY is a perfect example, right? DKNY was the most amazing company, was really the standard, in my opinion, by which contemporary fashion was judged in the early to the mid 1990s to the late 1990s, and really because they didn't evolve, they sort of grew old with their customer. Is that you know, DKNY is not on the forefront anymore. And if I had in the mid 1990s, if I had been sitting here speaking to you guys, every one of you guys would be thinking of DKNY. And I think that there is an opportunity. Companies have to continue to evolve. Companies have to continue to move forward. You know, I speak to my people all the time in the company, is that we have to constantly push ourselves forward. We have to constantly, even though we're successful doing what we're doing, we can't get stuck. And that we have to move forward. We have to create evolution in our company, not revolution, because revolution is something totally different. Evolution is a continuation of the same ideas that continue to evolve and freshen up. Revolution is confusing to the customer. So if one day it's this and the next day it's that, you're not building anything with any customers. But the idea is to continue to evolve. The other thing is that, and this is one of the things that I think happened, you know, I talk a little bit about what's going on in, I mean, the world today. I mean, I'm not an economist, so I couldn't tell you about that, but certainly I know a lot about what's going on in our industry. And you know, it's a very scary time because you know, the industry, as the world is retracting very quickly, and I was speaking to Eric earlier, the business in 2009 is going to return, the fashion industry, you talk about stores like Saks Fifth Avenue, Neiman Marcus, Bergdorf Goodman, Barney's, and really, when, you know, I'm more focused on the luxury segment or just below the luxury segment, not, you know, the Macy's and Walmarts of the world, but the luxury industry is going to return to levels in like 2004, 2005. You know, you saw last month's retail sales in the stores that I mentioned down anywhere between 20 and 30% over a year ago. So there's a tremendous retraction. Now, that can be very scary, but that can also create great opportunity, because what's going to happen is that America basically was overconsumed in so many areas. They were certainly overconsumed in clothes. They were over-consuming. How many pair of shoes, how many bags, how many this, how many that. And the real estate developers were just building more and more stores that, you know, stores like Saks Fifth Avenue, Neiman Marcus, sure, I'll open another store. And what's happened is there are too many stores, there's too many manufacturers. Everyone was just, more is better. And when I look at what my people were doing at Theory, my people thought that instead of having 20 styles on the line, you have 30 styles on the line, you do, you know, 30% more business because you have 30% more styles. It's not like that. And now what we're doing is we're refocusing. When in doubt, take it out. If it doesn't sort of meet all the qualifications, it doesn't go on the line. That same thing is what's got to happen in stores. Stores are going to weed out resources. Stores are going to cut out their underperforming stores. I wouldn't be surprised you're going to see some pretty high-profile stores go out of business. But all of that stuff is really getting back to Charles Darwin's survival of the fittest, right? And you know, I think it was too easy. And people weren't minding their business. And I think that the quality, integrity of the work, of the clothing, of the experience in the retail stores, is what it's all about. And I think you have another problem with retail stores because, the department stores are really, in a way, becoming obsolete. And I'm not here to say to you that in the next 5 years there's going to be no department stores. There are going to be department stores. I think department stores are necessary. But I think the number of department stores that exist is going to be a lot less. And I think that, you see something like what's happening in internet sales. Internet sales is one end of the business that is moving ahead. It's one end of the business that's up from last year and going to get even improve. That business is going to get stronger and stronger because you guys are a generation that feel very comfortable shopping that way. And as you guys become more and more part of the buying power of America, of the world, I think that more and more business is going to be done that way. So I think that there is going to be somewhat of a shift. I'm not saying it's replacing shopping in department stores or shopping in stores, but I think it's going to cut into and be a factor. So I believe that there will be over the next couple of years a weeding out process of stores, a weeding out process of manufacturers. And I think that even if you go today and you see what's going on in some of these department stores, they are doing everything they can. You go to Bergdorf's, you go to Saks, you go to Bloomingdale's, I think the stores are looking better because they're all working harder. And they're sort of doing, the executives at those companies are doing the same thing I'm doing. And I'm going back and doing things I haven't done in years, getting involved in manufacturing and design and merchandising issues and getting involved in areas of the company I haven't done for a long time, getting more involved in what really the experience that the clothing that we're making and where we're making it, how we're making it, the integrity of the experience, that is theory. And I think that that's happening throughout our industry. And I think that's important because, again, it's the visionaries in our industry that need to lead us out of where we are and need to provide new energy and new excitement. And without leadership, no company can survive. And I think that as I'm very close with many of the leaders of our industry, they are getting re-energized and re-involved in manufacturing and designing and retailing like never before. So I sort of rambled a little bit. I am happy to answer any questions. I'm happy to sort of talk to you and maybe tie some things you guys are learning in school. Well, none of it. Okay. Hi. Why is theory? So here's the thing. I sort of didn't believe in naming the company after my name or any name, because you see what happened is one day I sort of had the vision that I would want to sell the company, and I may want to sell the company and be able to do other things, because I had experienced my father and my grandfather sort of stuck in their business for their whole life, and my dad died still working in his business. He didn't have the freedom to be able to do something else. And so I sort of picked up that, who knows, one day I may want to, this could be successful and I want to have some financial freedom to do something, and if it had my name on it, that would never work. So anyway, and also at that time, theory was about an idea. Theory was about an idea of making clothing with lycra, of individual pieces out of, it wasn't about anyone's name or anything like that. It was a concept. And actually, I was going to originally call it stretch theory, because fabrics with lycra, stretch theory, but I decided that that may be a little bit too limiting, and I just like the name theory. So everyone said to me at that time, oh, well, that's not really a very good name. And actually, the interesting story is that there was this guy that I knew that owned the name Theory. And he had the name registered, he wasn't using it. I picked up the phone, I called him, and I went over to his office to see him, and I explained to him what I wanted to do. I want to use the name. He said, well, my brother occasionally cuts up some stuff, sells it to discounters, uses the name Theory for it. I said, well, is there any way I could get it? He says, I think we paid $8,000 or $10,000 for the lawyer to register the name. Happy to, if you pay me the $8,000 or $10,000, you can have the name, and my wife and daughter, if they could have free clothes. So now every time I see him, I always kid him that the whole thing was about theory. But anyway. You know, one of the things, I ended up selling theory and so on, but one of the things that I like to do, and as I said to you, I invested in Alice and Olivia separate from theory. I invested in Alice and Olivia, and invested in Rag & Bone, invested in Kiki de Montparnasse, Griffin, so on, is I like to invest in sort of ideas that have started but haven't gone anywhere. And you know, there's other companies, a company called Hot Hippie that I really like a lot, that the girl used to work for me and I've helped her out a lot. But in terms of me making any big, I don't like big investments like that. I like getting involved in very small entrepreneurial ideas and using my experience and expertise and sort of connections to be able to make them bigger. Our theory was bought by a company called Fast Retailing. Fast Retailing is the owner and founder of Uniqlo stores. Uniqlo has a store down in West Broadway, not West Broadway, on Broadway. Really cool, cool store. And they like buying big stuff, but they're like a $7 billion company. I still get a lot of satisfaction from very small businesses that are doing things cool, that are having a new perspective on, you know, the way people dress and inspiring people to dress in a new way. So that's sort of what I like doing.
You talked about how it's really important to have a strong mentor.
Yeah.
Do you take that into consideration when you still take interns and you try to be a mentor?
You know, I mean, it's true. I mentioned a couple of people, but throughout my career, I've been very lucky because I've learned from even more than the 2 or 3 people I mentioned. But I always try to. There's a lot of companies that I help, you know, and meet with, and I'm on the committee of the CFDA Vogue Fashion Fund, and work with a lot of young designers in trying to help them, work with a lot of people within our company, and you know, try to develop them, and you know, hopefully they learn some of the right ideas. But you know, I think that's really important, and I think that you guys, I mean, I don't know, you're studying fashion merchandising. I don't know whether you're just going to college for the sake of going to college. You really have a passion or interest for our industry. If you do, I would say to you that it's important to get started with a good company. It doesn't matter where you start. It has no, if you start at the bottom of on the bottom of the barrel, it doesn't matter, because you got to learn business the right way, and you know, it's important to get started with a company that's got a good reputation. It's also important, I think, to get started in a company whose clothing you have some respect for. And, you know, everyone has a little different aesthetic and a little different taste. And every company, you know, you should find a company that matches sort of your beliefs and so on. And as I say, it doesn't matter where you start, it doesn't matter how much you get paid, it matters that you get started. And our industry, you know, most people, they're like sheep. They follow along the one in front of them. And I don't say that you obviously have to stay in line, but you don't have to follow along. You know, you can have some individuality in our industry. That's what's good about it, you know, and you can work. The interesting thing is that you can do something and I can do the exact same thing and get a very different result. And, you know, as I say, I likewise at one time was 20 years old, starting out in the industry. Yeah, okay, my father was a famous guy, whatever, had a place for me to go and start, but I wouldn't have been successful just because I was my father's son. And I was successful because, you know, I really tried to make it work for me and tried to figure out where I belonged and what I did well and how I could develop some successes for myself and some failures along the way too.
What do you think, which company do you think gives you the most competition, and how do you differentiate yourself?
So the most competition is ourselves, right? The biggest competition that we have in our industry, and you know, I'm not going to say that's true in every case, but in my case, my biggest problem is how I'm able to execute the game plan that we have, what the integrity of the close is, getting the company all working together, you know, really executing. I believe that at the end of the day, the most important thing that happens is how do those clothes fit and feel when somebody puts them on. It's all about that. How many times you go into a store and you see something, oh, I love the way that looks, or I love that color, or I love and you touch it and it's stiff. Or you go to put it on and it just doesn't fit you the right way. So when I started out my business, 100% of my resources was spent on the quality and fit of the clothing that I made. So in terms of competition, the competition is our ability to execute our idea. Now, that may not be true if you were talking about Saks Fifth Avenue, who's competing with Neiman Marcus, okay? And Saks Fifth Avenue and Neiman Marcus, they're competing, and so that's competition. But I still say that if Saks Fifth Avenue executes what their game plan is, and they execute it well, they won't have any competition. So at the end of the day, it's all about how people perform. And it's all about, you know, our industry, and whether, no matter what job you have, you got to do it well. If you do it well, things are going to work out, you know. So, and how do I differentiate fit, you know? Each company has an aesthetic. Each company has each good company. I'm not, because there's a lot of companies out there that are just got a big net trying to catch somebody, you know? I look at a lot of like the Gap, or you look at the ads that they run, the goddamn ads are spot on, right? It's really inspiring. But when you go in the store and you put it on and you feel it and it's maybe not exactly what it was cracked up to be. So, you know, I think that for me, I always try to execute the fit and the quality and the integrity of the clothes to match the consumer that I was trying to go after. And as I said to you, I'm not a guy that is trying to clothe America. I'm very much focused on and have a view on a particular customer, depending on what it is. And in all of those different companies, you know, I started them because I don't have the time to be the visionary there. And Alice and Olivia, there's a visionary. In Rag and Bone, there's a visionary. In Griffin, there's a visionary. Kiki de Montparnasse, and I just work with them to make sure that that they're on the right track, you know, sort of keeping them in the sandbox.
I'd like you to raise your hand. Most of you who are fashion design, I think most of us, raise your hand.
Fashion design. Oh, so there's a lot of those.
And they're fashion marketing, merchandising.
Yeah.
That's what could be your idea of visionary.
Yeah, you know, I try to cover sort of both. I mean, I myself deal in both worlds, you know, like I have to deal in both worlds. Like I have to be able to understand what is going to resonate with the modern contemporary consumer. I have to understand what's going to turn her on. And then I have to figure out a way how to reach her and how to make that come through, you know? You go into a store, like, it's very frustrating for me. Sometimes I go into our own stores, I go into department stores, I see our clothes, and, you know, it's just clothes on a rack. There isn't really a message, there isn't really an energy, there isn't a point of view. And that's sort of the key thing. The good companies, they are going to get their message across. And when you walk in and you see their clothes, it speaks to you. When I was starting Theory, I never advertised, I never PR, no nothing, right? So I used to tell people, oh, you know, people ask me what I do. I have this company called Theory. Oh, that's the clothing company that has the amazing fabrics and the incredible fit. Everyone knew what I was trying to do anyway, because the clothes spoke for themselves.
How did you find the capital to
Well, you know, I was 38 years old. I had a few dollars myself, and Elie had some money too. But you know, the interesting thing there was an interesting story. I don't know whether any of you guys did any research or anything. Elie and I are not necessarily the best of friends right now, but doesn't mean anything. We had a lot of good years together, but when I started with Elie had a company that existed, and his company provided computers and warehousing and finance, so that I didn't have to worry about anything other than designing clothes, manufacturing clothes, and selling clothes. And I plugged into his back office. It was good for him, and it was good for me. Yeah, but that's not always easy to find the situation, right? So I wouldn't suggest starting your own company till you get some experience. Certainly not in today's time. It's treacherous. And even myself, like I would not, there would have to be something pretty unusual for me to get involved in right now. And you know, I think that you know, our industry can provide so many amazing things and such an amazing opportunity, because, as I said to you, there is no right or wrong way to do things. It's the way that you can envision them that's the right way, and it provides a lot of creativity and room for freedom, you know. And I'm not saying that you have to fit between the lines, because if you're a total maverick, unless I guess maybe when you get to my stage, you can be a little bit more eccentric. But, you know, you have to fit between the lines, but you can be, it allows for creativity. It allows for one to think outside the box. It's not like other industries. You know, you look at our industry. I see a guy like Elie Tahari came to this country, and he had no education or anything, and he made a big success. A lot of the Israelis, a lot of the Moroccan Jews, a lot of the Indians, They're all successful in our industry because they are able to improvise and think outside the box. All those guys going to Harvard Business School and all those fancy colleges and so on and so forth, they're not able to improvise. They're not able, it's not, a lot of what goes on in our industry, all the signposts are there. Like, all the signposts are there for you to read. You just have to know how to read them. And it's not straight out of a piece of paper. You have to be somewhat intuitive. You have to have some sort of sensitivity. And usually people from a culture that allows them to improvise and allows them to see things, 1 and 1 is supposed to add up to 2, but sometimes it doesn't. Yeah.
Yeah, I was just wondering, I've read a study recently that said that designers and manufacturers are going back to the recession, going back to the fact that they propose with muted colors. I was just wondering, the worst economic crisis in the 1980s, if you didn't see that look on it at all.
So, I think I got the question. Hopefully I'm going to answer it. The interesting thing that I see happening is that although the business is tough, I told you about the figures in department stores last month, and that's like 4 or 5 months in a row of that kind of stuff. The things that are working, it's not necessarily back to basics. It's not necessarily about color. It's about fresh, new product. Like, you guys are going to get inspired because you see something from Alexander Wang, or you see something from Philip Lim, or you see something from a company that has a fresh perspective that you can add a item to your existing wardrobe that makes you feel good. That people are shopping from their closets, so they got all this stuff in their closets. They're not buying more of what they have in their closets. They're buying something to add to that. And it's interesting because, as I say, I'm involved in. I didn't talk to you about Helmut Lang, but I also have Helmut Lang. So Helmut Lang is up 40% over last year, and a lot of these other companies, Alexander Wang, Griffin, so on, not that I'm involved with them, but I'm very close with Alexander Wang. I mean, these guys' businesses are up 20-30% over last year because they have a fresh perspective. They're speaking to the customer in a new way, and the customer's reacting to them. The truth of the matter is, you're not going to go out and buy a new home, or you're not going to go out and buy a new car, but spend a few dollars and buy something that makes you feel good. A new article of clothing or a shoes, a bag, and the customers are reacting to something new.
You mentioned Elie and also Paul Hippie. Do you think we're going towards a more casual trend in the future?
I think that it's an interesting question. I think that there's always going to be a mix between casual clothes and more career type clothes. But I think that it all depends the consumer segment that you're talking to too, right? So if you're talking to young people, I think all of that's there. It is going to get more casual. It is going to get more sort of relaxed and sort of fun like that. So I do believe in the clothing getting a little more casual. But I think that that's also cyclical depending on the time of the year. I think certain times of the year, lend themselves to more casual clothes than other times of the year.
Andrew, I've been hearing a lot from designers that talking, not only many people in fashion talking about the 30s, 40s, 50s, the glamour, there's a lot of kind of forecast.
I mean, I'm sort of into like the 70s right now, and 60s and 70s, more so than I am the 30s and 40s. But, there's a lot of interesting stuff happening. Like, I see some interesting stuff happening with a new generation of sequins. Sequins were everyone was sort of doing them. I think some people are doing it in some interesting ways. I really like feathers. I really like fur going forward. you know, I like sort of some of this kind of stuff. But do I see that glam of the 30s and 40s? Not necessarily so much. But no, I don't see so much of that. I don't see so much of that. But
I don't feel it. As you said, it's intuitive, it's what you feel.
I think that for you guys, the best show, if you see the Lanvin show on style.com, that was the best show of the Paris-Milan Fashion Week. Lanvin. Yeah. That was the best of all the shows. You guys should look at that. He's amazing, that guy Albert, that does that. Of the American shows, I'm trying to think what I liked. I mean, Alexander Wang is very good. The Rag and Bone show was exceptional too.
What do you think of, I have Ralph Rucci coming as a guest speaker.
Ralph Rucci.
That's another.
I'm like these guys. I wouldn't raise my, I don't know him. You guys know him? I don't know him. You guys all know him.
He was around for 25 years, and he's really, he's couture, and he's individual, and he's into Chado Ralph Rucci, the former Japanese tea ceremony. I was just curious, because that's another. What?
I just have a question.
Ask.
With theory, you seem to really find a niche in your market, and I was just sort of interested in knowing if it was sort of a gut feeling, the customer that you wanted to reach out to, or did you do a lot of research, and how did you research your client? Because it seems to me that you may have a non-traditional approach in doing research and finding out.
Yeah, I don't do any kind of research, you know, traditional research like that. I mean, you know, I have to understand something. Like, I've been doing this for 30-some years, and I don't even read fashion magazines. It's not really what I do. I sort of get inspired by clothing, get inspired by ideas and so on. And you know, I'm always working with our design group, and always, you know, just being out there and looking at things, and you know, just get feelings about certain things. So I am so totally connected with the theory customer that, I mean, it drives people in my company crazy, because it seems somewhat arbitrary, but for me it's very black and white what is and isn't theory. You know, but that's just the way it is. But I don't do a lot of research. One of the companies, I think one of the best companies in our industry, not a, American companies, is not a clothing company, is this Coach. Now, whether you like or don't like the stuff, I don't really love the stuff aesthetically, right? So I'm not going to say to you, oh, I think Coach is amazing aesthetically. But I think that guy, Lou Frankfurt, who runs the company, and Reed, who's the designer there, they run a great business. I'm very friendly with them. They do a lot more research kind of stuff than about, you know, shopping patterns and all that kind of stuff. I like to feel that I'm plugged in to our company and our customer, that I don't really have to do all that kind of research. I do a lot of research, like I have sort of in the back of my mind, I have some questions, right? So I'll speak to people and ask them questions about the things that I'm questioning. And, you know, like some people who I have a lot of respect for, and I believe their opinion. So if I ask them a question, they give me an answer, maybe the value of that answer is worth a lot, and other people, you know, the value of the answer is worth less. But I do a little bit of that kind of survey myself, just to, I do a lot of disaster checking. I call that disaster checking. But I do that sort of myself personally, so I can interpret it. But listen, at the end of the day, I have to make sure that I'm comfortable with the decisions that we're making. So I tend to like to be involved in doing my kind of research. And all I'm saying to you is that at the end of the day, it's good if you're going to run a business, own a business, to be close to what's going on. You can't sort of mail it in. You got to be there. And you know, our business is moving and changing every day, and you know, you gotta be able to read the signposts. So it's, you know, other businesses you can do it differently. In our business, you got to really be on top of it. And when you lose your edge, there's somebody else coming up that's going to have it. So you can't lose it.
Any more questions? I'm sure you'd like to.
All right.
I must be graduating in the next few months to a few years. So, and the whole job crisis is going on right now. What would be like the most crucial advice would you say for us students going out to try to get a job?
You know, you go to an interview, what you look like, how you act is everything. You know, because people are, unfortunately, I'd like to say to you, it isn't that way, but in our industry, everything is about perception. So the perception that you create when you go to an interview is critical. The other thing that I say to you is that I would be less worried about how much I made and what I did as to the fact that I got into the company that matched my aesthetic and my beliefs. You know what's happening today is that most companies aren't hiring. But if they are hiring, and it's a terrible thing, I wish I didn't have to, I wish this wasn't the way it was, right? But you just, you gotta make it easy for a company to hire you. You know? The easier you make it for someone to hire you, to make a decision, okay, I'm gonna give you a chance. But, so it's not about where you're working or how much you're making. When I say where you're working, what job you're working in. It's about your passion and enthusiasm. Because, you know, the beautiful thing, and it's very easy for me now. I'm 52 years old, right? So I have 34 years of experience, whatever it is. And I can look back on my career and I can see sort of where things went right and where things went wrong. And it's always important to reflect on what has happened and how you've done things and what's worked and what hasn't worked. It's important to know, more important probably to know what hasn't worked than what has worked. And so, you know, one of the things that it worked out for me with all of the freaking disasters that I had in my life is because when I was young and I worked in the factories, I worked in the warehouse, I worked in the showroom, I worked in the different parts of the company, I learned the industry. I knew what was what and where was where. I had a skill. And I could do that when I was young. If I was 25 or 6 years old, it was too late for me to do that. I learned it when I was young. And, you know, I had a real something to build off of. And so that's why I say to you, you know, now is the time. It's competitive from the fact that there isn't so many opportunities. So you have to do a little extra. You know, and I know everyone likes to have fun and so on and so forth and all, but, you know, you got a great opportunity with your two professors here. You go to a great school. You know, it's a different time today. You got to take things a little more seriously. So I would, you know, and as I say, it's easy for me to say. I can look back on things. But I was always sort of pretty serious because, you know, I had to make a good impression. But I would be careful. Everything, you know, it's funny. I'm on the CFDA Vogue Fashion Fund. The CFDA, everyone knows what the Vogue Fashion Fund is. We pick 10 finalists. The 10 finalists then go through a series of interviews and so on, and they get, the winner gets $250,000. They get a lot of exposure and everything else. Anyway, everything that happens from the time those designers are chosen till we pick the winner any little thing that they do, good or bad, reflects. So you think people aren't paying attention, you think people don't notice, you're going on a job interview, they notice everything. All right.
We have no more questions. Thank you very much.
Sounds good. All right, I didn't prepare this script, so that was okay.
Thank you for coming. I didn't mention that, but Mr. Rosen has had a few series of things.
All right.